Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, March 5th, 2019. Yes, okay, just checking, still getting the date right. All right, everything going okay. Thumbs up on the broadcast. Everything seems to be going okay. Double checking what's happening right now live on Twitter, and everybody seems to, people are all over the place, I guess. Lots to catch up on, lots we didn't get to yesterday. More craziness happening at any minute, I think, and we'll try and catch up with some of this as we move on. Maybe we can fit in some of the long reads today, maybe not, I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, lots to, as I said, catch up on. Lots happening in the last day or so that we didn't really get to fill in the details on. Yesterday, Greg alerted us to the fact that the House Judiciary Committee under Chairman Jerry Nadler was going to be issuing all sorts of, at this point, requests for documents. When requests for documents are refused or otherwise go uncomplied with, they often evolve into subpoenas. But we're not quite at that stage yet, but that they were releasing a long list. The number discussed yesterday during the early hours was in the neighborhood of 60. It turned into a list of about 80 people and organizations from whom at least some documents were requested. And it's a pretty impressive list, pretty comprehensive. A lot of people spent the rest of their morning tweeting other names that they thought should be on the list. Most prominent, I think, among the names not explicitly on the list was Ivanka Trump, but I think they're sidling up to that. Donald Trump wasn't actually on the list either. Donald Trump Jr. was. But Nadler apparently already saying, that may be something that we eventually get to. But we're taking it slow. We're just out of the gate with 80-something names. And it's, like I said, an impressive list. It's everybody you pretty much thought should be there. Maybe there are some exceptions who aren't there just yet, but may find themselves there at some point in the near future. I would say be patient for that. And I think a list of 80-something names buys us a little time in terms of being patient. We're all tired of being patient. When are we going to get this thing underway? Time really should be considered at a premium at this point. This is a good start. Now, how quickly those requests will be, or this list will be translated into actual letters that are dispatched making the requests, how quickly people will comply with the requests, how quickly we will move to the subpoena stage if they don't comply with the requests, that I don't know. But that's part of the reason why time is of the essence, right? This 80-person, 80-entity list, even if you moved, or even if that was a list of people for whom the letters have already been written, which wouldn't be a bad way to start. I don't think that's how they started, but even if that were the case, I guess the letters would go out, and, they typically give people, depending on how much material they're asking for, 2 weeks, a month, something like that. So it'll probably be well into April before we start to hear about people who haven't complied or haven't complied fully with the request for documents. And then there'll be hearings about whether or not the request was fully met. And there'll be, I suppose, some televised debate in the committee, possibly, streamed debate anyway, about whether or not the compliance is sufficient. And then they will schedule a hearing. And then in 2 weeks hence, the first name on the list who needs to be subpoenaed will be considered. Maybe there'll be 10 subpoenas considered a day. Then they would have to be probably voted on, not only in committee, but later on in the House, if they wanted to, I guess actually that doesn't come until they move to the situation where they feel like the subpoenas are not being complied with. That's another round of this, right? You send out a subpoena, give people 2 weeks to a month to comply with the subpoena in the same way that you were asking them to comply with the request, hoping that the word subpoena will scare them into doing the work this time, and then they won't, and then you'll say, that's it, we need to hold them in contempt, and then you'll have to schedule a hearing for the contempt resolutions. 2 weeks hence, there would be such a resolution. There would be some debate over it. Then it would have to be scheduled for the House floor, and there would be back and forth about whether it's important to issue those citations for contempt versus, let's say, take up, some sort of amazingly important thing. The Green New Deal. I don't know. It won't be that, but anything would have to compete for floor time, and then there'll be a debate over whether or not it's time well spent, given that there's a likelihood that the subpoenas themselves wouldn't be enforced, or the contempt resolutions, rather, wouldn't be enforced. You can see this eating up the better part of a year already. And that's if, for one such request, if it doesn't come through, if they don't comply with these things. So, there's a lot of work to do. That's why those 80 plus names have to be out there now. There's less excuse later on when people say they need more time to comply. And you might as well just put the list out there and say, there's a lot of work to do. We're going to have to follow up and spend a lot of time doing it for a lot of these names and a lot of these entities. We're way behind as it is. Of course, lots of people pointing out that these investigations are already 2 years too late. We spent 2 years with Trump in the White House and Republicans in charge of the House of Representatives doing not only no investigation of Trump, but actively covering up for Trump. And it puts me in mind of is back in the day when those ancient times, when we were supposedly as a nation on the hunt for Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction, and we just couldn't seem to turn those things up. Gosh darn it, 6, 8, 10 years of searching. But we were reminded Saddam Hussein had 12 years to hide his WMD. We should have at least, this was actually, they used this as a line of argument, we should have at least that long, at least 12 years to look for them. Even when we're in our 10th year of searching for these things. That doesn't necessarily follow, but for some reason, I guess that made bumper sticker sense, and we allowed them to make that stupid claim, and then when we got to the 12-year mark, still, there were Republicans holding on and saying, he just hid them really, really well. Well, I guess if you have 2 years to cover up for Donald Trump and not only not investigate him, but actively cover his tracks and make excuses or gaslight about what he's been doing, well, at the minimum, you should have 2 years to investigate him. And of course, that's all we're going to get at this point. That's all you're guaranteed. You never know what happens in the next congressional elections, but hopefully, if you win them, you buy yourselves another 2 years, I would guess. Not on the same basis, but it was never really, the oversight power was never really based on how long did Republicans spend committing those crimes and covering them up. But, if you want to use the same bumper sticker, go ahead. Why not? I say use the Republican bumper sticker on things to sow confusion and allow us to get our way, if it works, I guess. I'm not real happy about it. But for instance, like we were discussing the other day, if you find yourself in conversation with somebody over, the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, anything really, and if they ever ask you, well, how are we going to pay for it? We've been working hard to come up with decent answers for that and lots of good rhetorical devices like, how come they never ask, how are you going to pay for it when it's a defense initiative or invading a country or whatever it is? That's all good rhetoric and everything, but like I say, I now advocate simply answering that, we're going to pay for that with tax cuts. The tax cuts will not only pay for themselves, but they'll pay for this initiative as well. And if conservatives want to insist that that's ridiculous and crazy and stupid way of approaching things, more power to them, because that'll only help us in the long run. You know what? I used to say that too, but then I realized you didn't care about that. And no matter how many times we said, no, a tax cut doesn't pay for itself. No, a tax cut isn't going to pay for any other programs. You kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And so we're going to do it too. And if you're opposed to tax cuts, let's just go out there and have a debate and tell people you're opposed to cutting their taxes and that you're going to raise them, and that not doing this proposal will cost $94 trillion. That's number still floating out there. The idiotic, picked out of thin air number of $93 trillion in costs attached to the Green New Deal, which I don't know. It's now made it to sort of mainstream acceptance. It was part of a Saturday Night Live joke the other day, which again, you don't want to take all the fun out of Saturday Night Live, but it's not up to Saturday Night Live to cull those Republican memes from our public consciousness. But, repeating it gave it life. I suppose for people who do dumb things like watch The View on television and even worse, listen to Meghan McCain when she says things on The View on television. I note that she was, I guess they were hosting Jay Inslee the other day, maybe yesterday, maybe this morning. What do I know? Anyway, the clip was circulating this morning, and McCain pulls out basically the attack was, isn't it stupid to listen to you about the environment because you endorse the Green New Deal, as do all the Democratic candidates, and I don't know whether that's really true or not. But here it says it's going to cost $93 trillion, and I'm pretty sure I know that that's not true, because who the hell would know that? And also, I don't know what that figure purports to be. I assume that's the 10, 20, 50, who even knows, year cost of everything that could possibly be related to what they imagine might be Green New Deal initiatives. But of course, they wouldn't know what Green New Deal initiatives are, because the Green New Deal doesn't actually lay out much in terms of what those initiatives are. There's some, again, broad goals, and I'm not opposed to the idea of having broad goals. This Green New Deal resolution doesn't bother me in the least. It's not particularly concrete, but that's actually okay at the moment, and I don't see any reason why you can't have broad goals. I don't see any reason to be afraid of it. I don't see any serious squeeze being put on by reality-based people, anyway, about having supported such a resolution. Now, you're going to have to deal with crazies who are going to say things like, you just voted for something that costs $93 trillion, but they don't have any idea what it's going to cost. And neither do proponents at this point have any idea what it's going to cost. And not only that, we don't even get to the terms of the deal that they might even be calculating. I don't know if it's a 10-year cost. McCain also broke something down and said, well, $93 trillion, that's $600,000 from every single one of you, which, by the way, is probably about what our mom spends on pool houses in a single year. Not a huge deal for someone like Meghan McCain, but everybody else is meant to roll their eyes and say, oh my God, they're going to take away all my money because $600,000. But, over the course of 10 years, the number probably isn't even close to correct. But even if it was $600,000 over 10 years, it's nothing to sneeze at, $60,000. But when you say you're going to spend $60,000, remember the Green New Deal is like a comprehensive thing that touches every part of the economy, which, it in its own right is a scary thought. It means you got to take it seriously and you got to be careful with what you're doing. But to tell somebody that, did you know that over 10 years you are going to spend $600,000? Some people, of course, will say, I'm not even going to handle $600,000 in 10 years. But others would say, well, am I going to spend $60,000 in one way or another, either in hard cash or things being taken out of my pocket by various automatic payment programs and or taxation? Or am I going to work enough hours that my contribution to the economy is worth $60,000 in a year, if you include every penny I spend, every hour I work, and every deduction that's taken out of my account? That's pretty achievable. But does it mean that every cent you earn is going to end up being spent on somebody else's Tesla? No. That's not what it means. And it's ridiculous to say so, but we allow this sort of thing to go on. We normalize that. They shut her down pretty good, and the rest of the panel, as well as Inslee, certainly denied the numbers. But, you know, you need more time in a show like that to point out, all right, well, one, the $93 trillion figure is pulled out of somebody's ass, and it's not based on anything. And two, we are talking about a major overhaul to a lot of what will happen in the economy. And to say, you know, that it's going to cost us. What does it mean to cost me $60,000 in a year? If I eat, that's going to cost me money. If the price of what I eat is higher, of course that would cost me more money. But if the price of what I eat is lower, it still costs me money to eat. Does that scare? It's going to cost you $10,000 for food next year. Does it cost me $10,000 for food now? Yeah, it might. In fact, what if it costs me $11,000 for food right now? Couldn't you still scare the crap out of somebody by saying, do you know you are going to be cost $10,000 in food next year? If you're not prepared with the fact that it just cost me $11,000, you might go, you gasp, like the woman in the Ted Cruz porn thing. Somebody circulated that picture again today. I can't believe that happened again. You know, there's a lot of propaganda, a lot of gaslighting, and a lot of purposeful manipulation of the facts and the speculation around here. Armando wants to know if we're going to talk about the House document requests. I will if you want to. I don't know whether anybody else wants to, but I will entertain it certainly. I don't really have that much to say about it because we could read the list, but right at this point, there's not much to say about it except to say all of the things that they are suggesting investigating ought to be investigated. I don't know if they all necessarily need to be done by the judiciary panel, and they may want to divide the labor a little bit. But, and I don't know exactly what they're asking for either, but they are asking of the right people, that's for sure. But certainly I would entertain a request for some discussion about that. Another issue, and, you know, hey, Armando, maybe you want to discuss this one too. I don't know whether they have anything to say about this, but a big topic of discussion. Apparently there is now circulating a resolution circulated among Democrats, the idea of which apparently, although the text doesn't actually outright say so or suggest it, though they're thinking about amending that even, but it is being billed as a reproach to newly elected Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Am I pronouncing her name correctly? Yes. Of Minnesota. And let's put it this way. No, don't do this. Dumb idea. Don't invite this problem. This is, I don't know where we are. I feel like the last couple days, I feel like I've been stuck in somewhere between 2005 and 2008, over and over again. I've been talking about filibuster reform again. We're having people worry that talking about impeaching a Republican president is Democratic overreach again. We have people saying we're going to have investigation fatigue again. We have people proposing new ACORN condemnation resolutions in this form of this reproach to Congresswoman Omar. Again, we have motions to recommit causing a problem again. This is very disturbing, to say the very least. Look, some of her comments, I'm sure, I'll take your word for it. They've disturbed some people. They may even be right about it. I don't care. You don't invite on purpose this sort of division and infighting. It's foolish, and you're not going to come out of it looking particularly good, and nobody who is pushing you from the other side of the aisle to take care of this business is going to give you a pass for having taken care of it. This won't take care of it. It will simply demand more of you, that she be expelled in some way. And meanwhile, you're harboring Steve King. So no, forget about it. And I don't even want to have that debate. I don't even want to use it to point up the hypocrisy of harboring Steve King. I know you're harboring Steve King. You know you're harboring Steve King. It doesn't help anybody at this point, and it certainly doesn't help anybody. I don't know why this couldn't have been handled, A, off of Twitter, which probably would have been a good idea, and B, off of anything. Why is there no house mentor who can speak to her and say, look, I don't know why this keeps coming up for you, except I do. But, meaning, they're going to have eyes on you like you'll never believe. I'm going to use a Trumpism. They're going to have eyes on you like unbelievable. And you're in the spotlight. And, okay, there are some people who are going to be sensitive to every single thing you say, whether you're right or wrong. So, A, you need to be aware of that. B, why don't we open some channels for you to have a discussion with people who claim to have been offended, rightly or wrongly, by the things you say, and have some discussion about that, as opposed to having the fight be on Twitter and then it's open to everybody to see, and then they can demand these retractions. I don't know if I even want to venture an opinion on the substance of what she has to say. I don't even know that I'm up to date on what she has to say. My opinion on the matter is that this is not yet mature enough an issue to be addressed by resolution on the floor, and that you are surrendering control of our most valuable resource to reactionaries at a very early stage. I would make a close analogy between this and the issue of motions to recommit. I spent a little bit of time yesterday, and I considered spending some more time today getting back to explaining the motion to recommit, the procedure around it, why it's a difficult vote, how it's used, and what you need to do about it. And those are all separate things that deserve their own consideration. The substance of the motion, of what's offered in a motion to recommit, often is very attractive, but my overriding point of it is that it is unvetted material, that you are allowing your floor opponents to spring on you as a surprise without serious consideration, without due consideration being given or allowed, for that matter, and ask to vote on what purports to be a substantive issue, but rarely actually is a well-thought-out substantive issue. And I feel very much the same way about this idea of addressing this problem, if it is a problem, through a resolution. I feel like you're giving away an enormous resource, the time of control of the floor. You fought very hard to win control of the House floor. To give it away on this, if you want to discipline a member of your caucus, you can do it as a caucus. If you want to discipline somebody to the extent that they lose their committee assignments, it can be done, but it can be deliberately done and discreetly done. And if you want to make a public issue of it, you can even make a public issue of it. What you can't allow yourself to do so quickly without real consideration is spend floor time on it, to spend public time on it. Says spend all the private time you want on it. But beyond that, it's going to have to raise itself. This thing is going to have to raise itself to a much different level, a much higher level, before you should be spending public time on it. If you want to spend public time on reprimanding people, spend public time on reprimanding Steve King. Spend public time on reprimanding people who make racist statements elsewhere. But if you have an internal problem, keep it internal. Don't make it a matter of official act of the House unless you've come to a final adjudication. This person either has to go or be stripped of all their committees and publicly admonished. And I don't think we're there at this point. She may be being careless with her words. I don't know. Let's find out. Let's not do it in the public eye. until I'm sure. Basically, when you convince me, then I'll move on it. And is it hypocritical, for instance, to try to move immediately to the public sphere if it's a Republican? You want to call it that? You go right ahead. If I can speak for Democrats for a moment, I won control of the floor. I get to decide what goes there. If I want to use it to shoot you in the foot, I'm good with that. If I want to use it to shoot me in the foot, let's have a meeting. Let's talk about that. And what am I going to get out of shooting myself? I know what I'm getting out of shooting them in the foot. What am I getting out of shooting myself in my foot? If you've got a great deal for me, if we're going to come out ahead, let's talk it out. I might meet you there in 2 months. You should not be moving faster to condemn this act, this comment, whatever it even is. I don't even know. You shouldn't be moving faster on that than getting Trump's tax returns. Why I'm hemming and hawing, gee whiz, I don't know. I could be dispatching this letter too soon. It could be panic in the marketplace. Dems are overreaching. Well, if you want to take something slow, take your own discipline slow. Do it deliberately. Do it right. If you want to be out there showing that you're proactive on these things and you don't tolerate this sort of thing from anybody, no matter where, well, if you're going to do it publicly, then it better be comprehensive. I better see resolutions like this about people who say Obama should go back to Kenya. I better see resolutions like this about people who say, Muslims should be kicked out of the country and we should smear them with bacon. I mean, how come I see no resolutions about that? You want to do it comprehensively, then I guess we could talk about it. But I bet that would go a lot slower, and I bet we'd be deliberating about it a lot more if we were bringing something that's sweeping to the floor. I'm not okay with this. This is not a good idea. That doesn't mean I excuse anything that may have been said. Again, I don't even know. I've got some idea of what you said. I frankly don't find it particularly disturbing. Maybe because I'm used to it. And maybe you don't want to let this thing grow out of control. But I'll bet there's a better way to keep a lid on it than by slitting your wrists. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, that are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We have Armando joining us to discuss, I think we got it through maybe 2 topics in the first half hour and didn't even finish either one of them. But let's see. We have the House document request out there on the table already, and then the Omar, well, I don't even want to call it the Omar resolution because she's not mentioned in it, and that's interesting.
Well, let's talk about Omar quickly, because I don't think there's that much to say. I mean, the one point I would make where I think I disagree with you is at some point she's got to be smarter. Listen, maybe she's an anti-Semite and she's doing what she wants. I hope that's not true, and I assume it's not. But she did the dual loyalties thing, and that's going to ring alarm bells. Either if you don't know it, you should.
Yeah, I know
whatever your intention is.
Yeah,
and it's not her first rodeo on this. She went through it with the dollars stuff. So it puts. Yeah, well, listen, not every Democrat can say no, that this doesn't matter. They just can't.
Right. Well, there are some places where you can't. That's true. I mean, I recognize that there are people with constituencies that demand aggressive pushback. Okay.
Right. All right. But let's talk about the resolution where I think your point is absolutely well taken, which is Don't make it specific to her. You've got King, who you never did a resolution on. You've got Jordan, who just did the dollars thing. Mm-hmm. You've got McCarthy. If you're going to name people, name them all. Name them all.
And you'll miss somebody if you do, so which should, be a warning to you that you're not going to get this right.
All right. Or you can do what they're probably going to do, which is name nobody and just condemn different types of discussions. Both and by the way, the West Virginia GOP and their anti-Muslim attacks. So you could do a nice generic, we hate all forms of bigotry thing, and that's probably, if they're smart, what they'll end up doing.
It's close. They have some mention of some other forms of bigotry in the resolution as it now stands, which is an amazing document for a number of reasons. But
it's nonsense. You just got to check the box at this point.
Yeah. But, including the box of who's sponsoring this thing. That was the biggest laugh I got out of it before I even read of it is that it says right up at the top, this resolution submitted by M, like Mr. or Ms. blank. They don't even have a name. This sweeping policy document on bigotry. Nobody has put their name to it yet. Like, come on.
It's a per curiam resolution.
Yeah, exactly. An
unsigned for those editorial. Who are lawyers, per curiam is when no judge wants to just put his name on an opinion and they just assign it to the court and just
people feel this way around here.
Most famously, you'll remember Bush v. Gore was a per curiam decision.
Okay.
So I think they just need to check the box, and going forward, just be more careful in how you. It's easy enough to criticize Israel, IPAC. B for BDS, criticize what is properly criticized in my view, the anti-First Amendment law they've been trying to pass, which is outrageous and won't stand muster. There's ways of doing it without, frankly, clouding up what you're trying to say. Don't use the word allegiances. Don't use the word loyalty. Don't use the word dollar signs. Just say what you want to say without all of the other stuff. You can do it.
It can be done. And it's a discussion that ought to happen, and that's the sort of thing that you pull somebody aside on the floor and say, can I talk to you for a second? I want to help you out.
I think that's what they tried the first time, not that effectively, but, it's the second time they're probably going to have to do this sort of, let's not have, bigotry is bad, apple pie is good resolution. Check that box and let's move on. So that's how I feel about that one.
Yeah.
I think the more interesting story today is the political play of the House document request.
Okay.
Which from what I think it took too long to ask for it. But that's me.
I see. The list. Okay.
I don't know which one you're thinking of. I'm talking about the Adler one where 81 people.
Yes,
81 people.
Yes.
81 people is nothing.
No. And
it's
especially
when
it's
about the
one guy and 65 LLCs,
whoever it is, it's just amazing to me. And I think the media, of course, is the media, but then there's guys like Axelrod, who's like, I don't know.
Oh yeah, right. Ugh.
You're making it look like a witch hunt.
I couldn't answer him. I didn't think it was important
You are
enough.
so awful. And by the way, as you know, I've been on a jihad.
Oh my God! Don't say that. Oh my God! We got a resolution against Armando now. See how easy this is. All right.
That's right. A holy war, a crusade.
No. Oh. Right. Exactly.
I've been in a war with Axelrod people. Axelrod. Axelrod's terrible. He's been terrible since he left.
Why not?
Things. At any rate, what is that? It's a request for documents for a wide investigation of a man who has been corrupt in every aspect of his life, his entire life.
Yeah. And even without getting to who it's about, it's a request for documents. It's Congress. We like documents. I want to read some documents. That's good. What's wrong with you?
Exactly. Now, it's not that it just makes this comparable, but I think everyone will recall the request, unprecedented request. This actually went beyond what Congress has done in terms of of these things. The FICE application for Carter Page.
Yeah.
Not only did they get all the documents, they printed all the documents to the public.
Yes.
Those documents are, frankly, by law, classified.
Okay.
As far as I know, Nadler hasn't asked for any classified information to be revealed to the public.
Not that I'm aware. I all we know is who he is making requests of, not what the request is, I guess.
I thought they actually know what the request is, and I've heard, I frankly did not dig into it, that what he's actually done is asked for documents that have already been produced to Mueller.
All right, then.
Now, that is actually a pretty important point, and it's going to be a problem for defending against these requests by the White House to the degree that there is any that these documents are White House documents, and obviously a lot of them will be. You can't claim executive privilege after you've waived it.
I suppose that's normally true, and you won't get it. You can go out there and claim it, though, and if you can, they will. And they'll just
they will, and then they'll go to court, and the court will say, "But you've already given these to third parties." Oh,
no, I didn't. You know, who knows what they'll answer to that? Okay,
I mean,
yes.
I know the argument will be, "Hey, but that was because it was a criminal investigation, and U.S. v. Nixon." It said, "Well, you know what? Sorry, once you've waived the privilege is gone for whatever reason it was going to."
Everybody unread these. Yeah. Okay.
So it's. If I was Nadler, I probably would have done it differently. I wouldn't have done one omnibus. I would have done a series of. I would have been issuing requests week after week. Now they've asked for this. Now they've asked for that. But when you do, I will say just optically, because politics is stupid and the media is stupid, I wouldn't have done it that way because then they said, "Look at that, it's harassment."
So
and then, well, it might be. I hear what you're saying. So we're going to do it. We're not going to stop. We're not going to worry what David Axelrod thinks.
Isn't that what Axelrod thinks?
But it's just managing it, and it just took too long, too. I think it's March. This should have been issued on January 15th.
Yes, that's true.
We've lost 2 months, David.
I am concerned about that. Now, I thought Axelrod was saying, wasn't Axelrod saying that he would have drawn it out, or that we should have?
No, he was saying this
or
is
just
too
not
big.
to do it at all.
Don't do it. It makes it look like a witch hunt. It's too many requests. He would have listen. Right. This is who Axelrod is, so I can't worry about that.
Yeah, I just took him at his word when he said maybe I'm wrong about this, and I just thought, okay, you are.
Okay, you are.
All right,
generally you are. So
there you go.
One more time.
At least you're sure that you might be. Well,
yeah.
Good.
So I think it's just the beginning of all this, and you can't worry about what. Listen, learn one thing from Republicans.
All right.
And it's this: just do what you're going to do. People are going to say what they're going to say, and see what you get at the end. Let me tell you something: if you produce a bunch of damning information, nobody's going to care that you sent 81 request 81 people. It's what you get at the end. What happens today what people say today doesn't matter. It's what happens at the end and what you produce.
Yeah, that's all right.
And you can do your own Mueller report. Frankly, I don't need Mueller's report if I can get all the same information and write my own.
Well, that's true. So yeah, I mean, maybe you want to be looking for that. I guess, maybe the fact that it is coming so late may have prompted them to say, don't spread it out. Just everybody, if we have the name and we're going to do it, let's do it all at once, whatever it is. We should have done it 2 months ago, or for whatever reason we didn't. I'm feeling the pressure.
That I'll buy. At this point, ask for everything now, today.
Yeah, and they'll probably be
You
more.
wasted 2 months. You did. They
more
wasted
names will
2
come
months. I know people don't like criticizing Democrats, but I've been screaming about this on your show for a while now. It's like, what are they waiting for?
Yes, well, this will take a long time to result in documents.
Exactly, because now you got to go to court because they're not going. People are going to resist, and that takes months. And it'll be July.
Yeah.
And then now you're bringing in witnesses, and that'll be August, or then there's a break,
lucky,
and then it's September.
I don't want to do.
All of a sudden, it's December, and we're in the middle of primaries, and you've lost the the focal point. Sure,
right.
You'll get coverage on it. But if you remember the summer of 73, you don't because you were too young, but I was 10 years old.
All right.
And the summer of 73 was Watergate.
Yes.
Nixon was elected in November of 72.
Yes.
By the summer of 73, the House had done enough work that it could hold very comprehensive hearings on Watergate.
Yeah, okay.
We're not going to have hearings in the summer of 19.
No.
I don't think.
I'd
be very surprised if we have, big hearings in the summer of 19. I know the Cohen thing, everyone says that was a big deal, and it was to some extent, but Cohen wasn't in the government. He wasn't, apparently, from what we can tell, involved in the Russian collusion. And he knew a lot of stuff, but, I don't know. I just think you don't waste 2 months when you're trying to, frankly, you're under against the clock here for these things. But anyway, it is what it is. Rush it now. Let's get it going.
All right. Well, I'm in agreement on that. It could take us a very long time.
Because David Axelrod or NBC is upset that, how does that look? Overreach. Just slap that. I mean, I wouldn't even respond to it. So that's ridiculous.
I did not.
I'm not even going to respond to your question.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense to ignore that. And also, that came in an interesting context yesterday. Now that I'm thinking about what to segue to, for Axelrod to offer that advice, like I say, I'm glad he prefaced it with maybe I'm wrong because it made it easy to know what to do with it. But it came in an interesting time following, I guess, what had been Twitter chatter all day up to that point, which was the interview with Brad. Was it Brad DeLong?
Oh, yeah.
Appeared in Vox, which set the table for everybody to say, "Hey, I just read this great article that said I should ignore David Axelrod." Basically, didn't call him out by name. Like the resolution hopefully will avoid calling out any members of Congress by name if they're going to go ahead with this thing. But I get the point. Maybe he's wrong. Maybe he is. Maybe I don't have to pay attention to you. Maybe you're right and I don't have to pay attention to you. Any of those things are a possibility, but we had spent the morning saying, yeah, it's time for the people who, through whether by default or through their own skills or whatever, led the way in the prior decade to perhaps recognize that the next decade doesn't belong to them by default.
Can I comment on that article because I read it? Yeah, and I like Brad DeLong, but I think he's mixing apples and oranges.
That could be. I don't know.
Let me tell you what I think he's mixing up.
All right.
It's one thing to understand that you have no good faith operators on the Republican Party side. You don't.
And
you never did.
To realize, yes.
I'm a neoliberal centrist hack, and I've been saying this since 2003.
Yes, all right.
Okay? So it's not a question of ideology. It's a question of understanding who your opponent is.
Yes.
Those are two different things. Now, when he says we need to step aside and let the left lead, first of all, there's two things that bother me about that. Number one, I wasn't wrong about the Republicans. You were. So why should I have to step aside? That's number one.
All right.
If you were wrong about the Republicans, step aside. I'll grant you that. But number two is frankly more important, which is, let's stop just saying, we're going to declare who the new leaders are. You know who declares who the leaders are? The voters.
Yeah.
When the left wins all the primaries and wins all the elections, and in this sense, I think the Justice Dems are absolutely right. Mm-hmm. Go to the blue districts. Try to get your people in. That's how you take over.
Yeah.
This is your old showing up argument, and it's absolutely correct. Show up, win. You'll be in charge. You'll be the boss. Put everybody else in the cheap seats. Mm-hmm. That's how you do it. And this notion of, I'm going to step aside and now it's your turn. First of all, no, you don't get to decide who's in charge. The voters decide who's in charge.
Yeah, I mean, one of the games that you play along the way is occasionally it pays to say things like, I'm in charge, and then see if everybody believes it. But, okay.
Exactly.
So, you do that from time to time. And sometimes people buy it, and sometimes people don't. Or sometimes you say it in different terms. I mean, AOC has said as much in at least one instance, and it was widely derided by people who didn't want to buy into it and widely accepted by people who did. So, trial balloon. Didn't do a great job of it because it was a little early.
It's way early, and you got to go win.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. You win. And you win in the primary, you win in the general election, and all of a sudden you have 218 votes for Speaker of the House. Mm-hmm. And you're in charge.
That's it. And you don't have to assert that you're in charge. It's just there.
Or you win the primary for president, and you're the nominee, and then you win, and you're the president. Guess what? Then you're in charge.
Yeah, you even get to be in charge before you win.
You don't get to be declared in charge by an article in the media or a tweet. You got to win. You got to win. That's our system.
It was an important concession in a way that, it doesn't change who's in charge. Some people will say, well, Brad DeLong said I'm in charge. Well, I don't care about that. You're not.
DeLong hasn't really been in charge. He's been at Berkeley being an economics professor. Right. He's not doing any policy.
So, but it was an important concession in the sense of a call for people who have been in charge to say, to acknowledge that there are some other opinions and other leaders on the way up here. And it's true. For a long time, this is just the dynamics of politics. You win some elections. Everybody knows what that means about who's in charge. And then your term is up. And then if the other party is in control, people still look to you as the party leadership of the out party. And you have some, because we don't know what else to base it on, you have some claim to that. But it's been a while now, so that, claiming to have been, or, even actually having been an important functionary in the Obama White House. It's like, I think we've dined out on that a couple times now. And good for you. Nice resume. But I'm not interested necessarily in that anymore. That's a good point, but what do you have to say about policy, or what are you going to do here with this situation? And do you recognize what you're up against? But it was an important concession or a point out there for people to read. For whoever it is that Brad DeLong's name registers with is going to say, maybe I am crowding somebody out. Maybe I ought to be more open to listening. It's a good, credible point, especially if you have the sneaking suspicion that you've been wrong about Republicans for a long time. You don't have that. And you shouldn't.
No, that's what I'm saying. He makes that an ideological point.
It is just a overgeneralization, for sure. And lots of people who were in the Clinton White House were right about Republicans. Didn't always get listened to. Because that was the approach that the president at the time, who was in charge,
I remember somebody had called them a vast right-wing conspiracy. I don't think she was wrong about them.
No, but she should shut up and go away, apparently.
And she won't, but she's not running for anything. She's not the leader. She's in the cheap seats with the rest of us now. So it doesn't matter.
She brings some experience. Yes.
Yeah, but no one's going to listen to her, and that's fine. You lose, you lose. That's it. Yeah. It's over. That's the way it goes. I'm happy to hear her. She has a following, but it's not like she's going to be leading the debate or the discussion of things.
I won't take it personally if she loses the debate on what should come next and say, she's worth listening to. Oh, yeah? Well, your big hero lost. She's not my big hero. I thought she had a good idea. All right. What's yours? Yours is better? All right.
But politics is like that. You lose. Yes. That's actually what I don't think people who are supporting Bernie Sanders realize is his loss will be taken as a loss for the entire ideas that he is promoting. That's the real danger here. He'll have lost. He'll be a two-time loser.
Yes, though there will be, I guess luckily for him, there are some others.
Triumphant.
Yeah, that is true. For those who are in agreement ideologically, you have the good fortune of having another group of people who might actually be able to take up some of, if not all of that mantle. So be happy about that.
Those ideas were defeated, so that's it. They're over.
Yes, but you put a different name on it. Now they're different. Yeah.
Well,
so
that I'm just talking about the risk of the way politics is. The way
it's true.
It's very much if the candidate lost, the idea's lost, and that's that.
Yeah. Well,
until somebody comes back. I guess your argument is, well, Goldwater lost, but then Reagan won, therefore Goldwater won, and I guess there's something to that. But
nobody says that. They say Reagan won because he did.
Right.
And sometimes it's the same stuff recycled. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing. I mean, I don't know. But I thought it was an interesting, because it was so well received. And that was a bit of a surprise to me. I didn't necessarily see in it anything that would have led so many people in my circle. I mean, it's a self-selecting thing to see it on Twitter. So many people saying, wow, this is so important, etc. Like, this is like a normal person saying, yeah, there's some other people with some good ideas out there, and it would be good for us to work with them. Well, sure. It's a symptom of politics in any era that it takes so long to get around to the realization that, maybe I should work with allies. That's the business you're in. But power being what it is, people want to accrue it to themselves and then deign to work with people. But I found it interesting that it whatever it was about the article, it laid a foundation for a lot of people who have been more inclined to be stubborn about things to start thinking cooperatively. So I like that.
I just think it's weird to say that that's something. Well, I just realized that in 2019, the Republicans aren't good faith operators. You figured that out in 2019, did you? Okay, well, you're a guy I really want to listen to. The reality is, DeLong is actually kind of faking it because he knew this long before. That he sort of created this straw man of who he was. Because I've read DeLong since the mid-2000s, and he was never one who really believed much in Republican good faith. But be that, think of it. He's very closely aligned with Paul Krugman. Do you think Paul Krugman didn't know what the Republicans were? When Ezra Klein was adulating Paul Ryan, Paul Krugman was taking Ezra Klein to the woodshed, saying, the guy's a fraud. What are you even talking about? So it's to me, it was sort of a fake story, both from the personal perspective of DeLong. But if he wants to wear that hair shirt, that's his problem. I don't accept it because I never. And it actually reminds me of episodes in our Daily Kos history where, remember, Daily Kos isn't that ideological. I know everyone thought of it as the far left back in the 2000s. But Marcus particularly is not that specifically ideological. He identified the problem, which was the nihilism of the Republican Party, and said that's the enemy, and we're going to treat them like adversaries because that's all they are. We're not going to work with them. We're going to defeat them. And then the rest of us can fight it out ideologically about what we should be. And he got criticized often for that by people who are of the left now and in high perches like the New York Times. So it's to me, it was a little galling to see that story, to be honest with you. So my reaction is, I guess, slightly different than yours.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because as you say it and explain it that way, I say, I'm certainly nodding along and saying, you know what, that's true. Yeah. And I certainly run into that every day in one form or another, some more extreme than others and some more general. This was such a broad, sweeping thing, and it felt slightly different until he explained it that way. That I can't tell you how many times in a week I see things like from a major leading journalist somewhere, either hawking a story that they're running or just admitting on Twitter that they've just come to this realization, or I just heard about this thing, and like, what? Now? Really? I just saw somebody, I don't think a journalist, but yeah, some famous personage the other day, like, astonished at the genius of what's her name? Of, Sarah Kendzior, who is great, but, like astonished that she just revealed to me. Did you know that Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump know Wendy Dang? Yes, I did. Well, that's astonishing because did you know that she used to date Rupert Murdoch? Yeah, she punched a guy who threw a pie in his face. You don't remember that? And do you know she's dating? It's rumored that she's dating Putin now. Yeah. Well, what the? Have you been? Are you okay? Is this one of those time travel movies where it takes us a long time and you to realize you're in the wrong time era and it's just comic relief until you realize you fell through a wormhole or what? No.
You know what's funny? I heard just in passing of some reporter saying that reportedly Murdoch asked Trump to check to see if Deng was a Chinese spy.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is funny.
That's a good idea. I mean, he's not wrong. Trademark.
No. Who knows what she is? I mean,
I don't know.
You know, I'm not. It could very well be. It could very not.
Could be a total racist thing we just said, and there needs to be a resolution about us. What? She's Chinese, and so she's a Chinese spy. Come on.
Yeah. I'm always
subject
amazed
to that.
when people find out some Russian guy gave Trump $98 million for some plot of land in Palm Beach at the bottom of the real estate meltdown. Okay.
Yeah, right, and it's news, and I sometimes see it from, like I say, from major players who I think of as on the ball and sympathetic to progressive views, saying things like that. And you can't. I mean, there's a million things I hear of, and people say, "Oh, you never really? You had no idea about that?" It's true, but it is kind of galling to see that. But I guess that's part of the game. So I'm willing to be more receptive to DeLong, perhaps. Maybe that's all I'm saying. All right, we'll take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I had to hold you up there for a second, Armando. Share your gem.
It was from yesterday, and I thought this was just in the whole, to circle back into the whole, resolution and what we're going to do.
Yes.
Jerry Nadler, who is the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, was attacked by Jim Jordan, GYM Jordan, I like to call him, because, as you know,
that's catching on.
Who attacked him and did the dollar sign, the Tom Steyer's conclusion. Tom Steyer has a Jewish father. Jerry Nadler, of course, is Jewish, and he makes it seem like here the Jews chasing money. And Nadler responds to him by saying, this was yesterday, so I'm a little late on it. He says, to be clear, this tweet counts both as inane and anti-Semitic, which is
good.
Really a good response, because it says, listen, you're an idiot and you're an anti-Semite.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why whatever the resolution is going to say, it can't just be aimed at Omar. You can't let this kind of stuff go by.
Yeah, and if you're going to get it out timely, which I don't care if you do, I hope you never get it out, then you're not going to fit on all the people, so you might as well name no one, and that's the way it is currently.
Right, and do it a Friday night at 5, as everyone's walking out the door.
Yes, do it. In fact, let's use an anti-Semitic trope. Do it Friday night at 7.
At 7.
And
exactly.
Right, and then all of you who stick around and vote, you should be in shul. And what are you doing here? So it's Shabbat. You can't be voting. It's electronic. Leave. Is that anti-Semitic to point out? I'm sorry. But don't I get a free pass? I thought I was allowed to do that. Anyway, okay. You want to do it on a Friday? I would prefer you not do it, but I am with you. No, you're right. I see. With. Right. If for some reason you've got to do it, if you've pushed too far and you can't back off now because you think the cost of backing off is greater, if you could make that argument to me, last thing on a Friday when everybody's flying, go ahead. And but someone should be talking to Congresswoman Omar about one, how to take this and what to take away from it, and to say, this is not, it's not the end of the world, and it shouldn't, no one should regard it as such. And I would be appreciative if the members of Congress who were continuing to make a Twitter battle out of this, some of whom are good people otherwise, would say, there's no prize at the end of this. So if you could educate and make her a more effective member of Congress that you'd be happy to work with in the future, terrific. I bet it won't happen on Twitter. I mean, I resort to Twitter because I have no other way of doing things. You could just pull her aside and say, why don't we have lunch? And I can tell you about a list of words, some of which you may know, and I'm concerned that if you know them, you keep tripping over them. Others, maybe you don't. Whatever it is. And surely there are some you could share with me. I bet there's something that I might say that, how would I know? I'm not exposed enough, that are inherently insensitive to Somalis. Maybe I'll learn something about that. But
you're right.
Handling it differently.
Okay. I take your point. It's probably not the best way to handle it. Maybe there would have been a different way to do it than what they're doing. And maybe they won't do it. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you've got to do it for whatever political reason, then
you're right. Some of them
have
to.
Timing.
I think, and I say have, nobody has to do anything, but it's politically favorable to them to condemn the remark. I mean, that's just.
Yeah, I guess
that's just the truth.
Well, it's the disturbing part is there are also those for whom it is politically advantageous to condemn the remarks who have possibly literally zero Jewish constituency, and whose constituency who has an interest in Israel is ultimately in its annihilation.
Yeah.
but in a good way, the Jesus way of annihilating.
What's the phrase?
Dominionism and the rapture, and yes, and as a part of ensuring the second coming, we have to, destroy everyone in the Middle East, including all the Jews, because who cares? Because the rapture's coming, they're going to be destroyed anyway. All right, well, that's not really all that helpful either. It might be of interest to include that in your resolution and say, P.S., I'm not fooled by the fact that you claim to be pro-Israel into believing that you're not anti-Semitic. I don't think that those things are incompatible. The way people, when a Christian evangelical says they're pro-Israel, there's further investigation that needs to be done. That doesn't mean that they don't long for the destruction of Judaism, which is problematic for those who support Israel, to say the least. But yeah, that doesn't necessarily address what she's been saying. I think that there's also there should be a lot more room to discuss things, and perhaps a lot less triggering and sensitivity, maybe. And maybe that's something that dialogue can bring about. Like, for instance, money in politics is a big and legitimate issue, and we all talk about it all the time. People use money. That's true. Now, if you say, well, that person uses money, they're Jewish. Oh my God. How can you bring up money of Judaism? The thing is, it's an economy and we use money. They're in it. But it's the same sort of thing like when you say, well, if you are foolish enough to get into a debate about racial issues, and here I mean specifically as between African Americans, black people, and white people, and say, and if you, God forbid, should be foolish enough to say something, those people. No. What? And it's been a trope for years. Oh, those people thing. Oh, what do we mean by that? Okay. There are some loaded terms that if you've been around the debate, you've been around the discussions, are trigger words. And I don't know how much a Somali American knows about American Jewish trigger words? I'm not positive. I can't tell. I'd find out. And I can't see how a resolution tells me. So, discussion. More discussion needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
thing with
unfortunate how it comes up. And again, I think she's got to be better. And of course, we have to be better too. But
we could help make her better.
I hope so.
Yeah,
I was just surprised that she stepped right back into it. It's only been a couple of weeks since the last one.
I don't know. If it's problematic, it's problematic, and we have that talk, and I don't know whether...
I think whenever you talk about Israel and allegiances and loyalties, it's the old trope. I mean, and as someone pointed out to me, well, that's what they said about JFK, so how's it anti-Semitic? Well, when it's directed at Jews, it's anti-Semitic. When it's directed at Catholics, it's anti-Catholic.
Yeah, no, that doesn't make any particular sense.
I didn't even understand that argument. But look, I think she can be a really good congresswoman. She's a freshman. She's only been at this a couple months.
She's an important person to include in this.
I hope she doesn't dig in her heels and decide, I'm going to keep saying stuff like that. Listen, I am the most PC person in the world. I really am.
Oh.
And people call me that. And I always say, don't say the C word. Try to not offend people. And they say, oh, well, you're always policing speech. And I guess I am, because I said, try to say it in a way that's not prejudiced.
Point. Yeah.
Try to avoid it. I mean, it's not, it can be hard, I suppose, when you're used to it. Listen, Donald Trump did a mock Jeff Sessions voice in that CPAC speech.
One of many crazy, crazy things. Yeah.
I mean, that was just it was straight up offensive, but I guess the Southerners are okay with Donald Trump mocking their Southern accents.
I guess so.
I just can't imagine if a Democrat did that, there wouldn't be 8 million stories about that.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that's true.
I mean, maybe nobody really cares. I don't know, but I felt bad about it. I felt like, what are you doing? I mean, it's not. You shouldn't do that. And when he does the Chinese voice, but he's 72 and he was a racist his whole life, so I don't expect him to change now.
Yeah, my thinking about it, as I get a better view of what it is that she was saying, I understand. Like I said, I would understand the sensitivities. I see why, but sometimes I think people see weird things that might not be there. I think here's my excuse for her. I have to
stop you for 1 second.
Right.
Okay, suppose you're absolutely right. Are you telling me she didn't know the whole loyalty and allegiances thing vis-a-vis Israel and Jews?
Here's how I would explain
how could you not know that?
I guess I'll start with that one, although I was going to start with the other one. But
this one.
The other one was, I think, just her as a Somali American immigrant and relatively young person picked up on slang. She thought she was being hip to say it's all about the Benjamins, and that was a very crude way of discussing money. And then people said, money, Jewish trope, anti-Semitic. Well, again, she was talking about money and politics and undue influence, and it's a legitimate complaint. And I mean, it's been a progressive complaint for a long time about AIPAC. Nobody likes AIPAC in the progressive circles, and people have gone out of their way to start pro-Israel issue lobbying groups that are definitively not AIPAC. They haven't done as well. AIPAC has a considerable amount more resources. Can't say money, because even though that's what it is that they have considerably more resources than, say, J Street, which is the group that was started as a pro-Israel but counter AIPAC. And I think she just thought she was using a hip American young person's methodology, method of discussing money and the importance of money, and not, everybody knows the trope of the money grubbing Jew. Maybe. I mean, maybe in Somalia they believe that. I don't know. It's entirely possible. But I also think that there's a different explanation. As for this one, the allegiances, now her actual quote is what? I think what she's saying, as I recall, the issue was that she had said something about making a priority of the policies of a foreign government, right? That the AIPAC was a group dedicated to promoting the policies of a foreign government, not our own, but that of Israel. And I don't think that's necessarily an accurate description of what AIPAC is all about, because there's an A in there too. But, you know, I don't think she actually said people have divided loyalties if they're Jewish.
She did not use the word divided.
And did she
used
say
loyalties? She said, do I have to pledge allegiance to Israel? Look, your conversation, my conversation with you now is actually pretty similar to one that Josh Marshall, and I played Josh Marshall, I guess, in that one, with Southpaw, whose name I forget, but I believe he's Asian. And I think that in some ways it's hard for me. It's just not sensitive. Okay, suppose that wasn't her intent. It was insensitive at the least. And coming 2 weeks after her last one, she's got to do better. Is just my point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair enough. I don't see where a resolution gets you.
Hey, it doesn't get us. No, I'm with you. We're probably overreacting, and I think those are political exigencies, not moral exigencies, or even social exigencies. We could all just say, you know what? Maybe she shouldn't use that word in that context. It's kind of, you know, there's a lot of history there. Maybe don't say that. And we could have moved on. But, you know, she's in the political world. Think of this. Let me give you a different one. This Tamika Mallory, who was in the Women's March thing.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You know, and she went to Farrakhan. Yeah. And she won't condemn Farrakhan's anti-Semitism. She just won't. And I said, well, that's her choice. But guess what? She can't be the leader of a broad-based movement. To me, and I don't know if you agree with me, I find Farrakhan beyond the pale. I don't see how anybody could possibly want to be in his presence. But I know I'm extreme on that point. Maybe you can see the good in him or the bad in him, but you've got to at least criticize the bad in him.
Yeah, I don't have anything play the game. Interesting to say about Farrakhan or helpful for him. No,
but you see, I'm just saying, when you pick where you're going to be. You're going to be in the arena. Mm-hmm. You're going to be a congressperson, and you're in the Democratic caucus. And thank God, you know, a strong component of the Democratic coalition is Jewish voters, and that's important to our to our entire coalition. Yeah, we have to be respectful of our coalition, and just as a political matter, forget about the morality. I'm talking about the politics.
Yeah, no, that's a great point to make with her.
And she's got to be more sensitive to that. Maybe it isn't a big deal. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe I'm wrong about what should be in the scope of things that you can say and how you can say them. Maybe my whole PC thing is just completely off base. But political reality is political reality. If you went around talking about, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a Latino trope that, you know, whatever. Yeah, right. The taco trucks, I guess, became the big joke, right?
Right.
So why was that offensive? Everybody loves taco trucks. Hey, you know, don't be so. No, it's a slur, and it's emblematic of a larger issue. And anti-Semitism hasn't gone away.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you feel that way? Did it register with you as a slur? I mean,
not so much to me, because remember, tacos isn't really part of my Latino culture, so I didn't think of it that way.
I mean, even if I guess I would have to ask a Mexican American, and they may not have, because I mean, but it would be interesting to know that that's the case, because it was a big, like, happy, fun sharing joke among progressives, and I didn't see anybody stop and say, "Holy smokes, that's a rotten thing to say." I mean, I get the sentiment.
And you're right. I couldn't register it because even though we all go under this umbrella because we have a common language, our cultures are very different. The Mexican culture is not the Cuban culture or the Caribbean Latino culture. They're different things. The South American culture is different. Mm-hmm. And I'm just I guess I'm not going to shy away from the idea that, you know what, try to find better words.
Yes. Well, there's definitely a lesson that needs to be imparted, and we may yet find out, she may have been raised in a virulently anti-Semitic environment and may have risen above it to some extent, or may still carry it and have made no effort whatsoever. And I just thought I was safe from my district where we still say things like that. Oh, well, then in that case, we got a problem and we should help straighten you out. But both as a political matter and as a practical matter, I say, well, what does a resolution get you? As a political matter, you may find yourself stuck and say there's a lot of sensitivities at stake, and guess what? It would only mean that you were correct, that we feel like we have to do this politically because there's so much money involved. And then it turns out you did have a point, but clearly, I mean, she could, if she were, I guess, educated further on the subject, maybe she already knows, and maybe she's just hesitant to say so because she feels like she'll be burned at every turn. But what if she were to come back and say, I'm aware of, and I've been talking a lot with the folks at J Street. Why is there a J Street anyway? What would be the point of having that? And why is it awesome for them to make their point about money in politics and the influence of AIPAC in America, and horrible for me to make that same point? And if it is the words, then I'll change the words. And if it's not the words, then it's anti-Islamic sentiment.
And I think there's definitely the reaction to what she said is absolutely an anti-Muslim bias. Absolutely correct. That is a tremendous point. If her name was not Ilhan Omar, she did not look like she looks.
Yes.
This would not be a big story. You're absolutely correct.
You just watched Jim Jordan do the same thing, and everyone's like, white
exactly. Guy. And part of that's Republicans versus Democrats.
True,
because
also.
Republicans try to be decent people, and Republicans simply do not care.
Mm-hmm.
This goes back to the DeLong point. They've never cared about being decent people.
All right.
So that's all true. And I think that's a very good point. And we should, and I think maybe that's what you were trying to get me to understand. And I was being a little slow, which is that part of this whole story is, in fact, anti-Muslim bigotry. And you're right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you brought it up.
Any other person says it doesn't get the same reaction. That's true.
Yes. And I mean, it's, I feel like they are attempting to do that wherever they can. And I mean, Muslims in Congress they've been looking for anything that they could get for a long time. And it's not that long because there haven't been any for that long. But I mean, immediately Keith Ellison shows up and oh my God, they threw him off. I threw him off the scent by showing up as Keith Ellison. They didn't get it for a long time until finally somebody said, I saw him take the oath on a Koran, something. And then, it was too easy for Congresswoman Omar or Tlaib to be singled out right away. And if they couldn't get her on something that was obvious as a trigger for, as a hint, a dog whistle to others. Oh yeah, this is anti-Muslim. You like that. With Rashida Tlaib, they got her on, something different, but it was a bigger deal because, or I guess they tried with Maxine Waters and it never really worked. It didn't catch on. But everything that she's said, Maxine Waters had said twice.
Well, the problem they have is,
and I'm glad she did.
At this point, you can only take it so far, demonizing African Americans. Right. Remember, Obama.
They've been burned with that one.
It was being black, but it was also his name.
Yes.
And, and he went out of his way, of course, to call himself Christian. Maybe, I don't question his sincerity. Maybe he is a Christian. I have my doubts. I'm not saying he's Muslim. I'm saying he's nothing. He's like
okay.
most secular people in the United States, in my view. I mean, we may be culturally this or that, but how many of us really go to church every Sunday? I haven't gone to church in 30 years. I don't know if you go to worship. And power to you if you do. But, you know, in the United States, we all have to fake it if we're going to be politicians. I mean, who's the atheist? Oh, Sinema. Kristen Sinema.
Yeah, she could do anything, apparently.
Apparently, she can wear
She's amazing.
dresses and be multisexual, but she's also pretty neoliberal hack, centrist hack too. So I guess it all works
have to
out.
Back off.
But she's the exception that proves the rule. How many atheists are there in the Congress?
Right.
I mean, declared atheists or agnostics even, or not religious people.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we don't know because they hold Bibles for the picture of them being sworn in, because if I don't, people will pick it out and say, why didn't you? Whereas,
for God's sake, Trump pretends to go to church now.
Yes, right.
Even Trump
That's
is
just crazy.
beholden to it.
Yeah, right. Well, and he presumably would be free to do whatever the hell he wants. And he does in practice do whatever the hell he wants. But for some reason, like everything else, I'm rich, I have enough money to cover all this stuff, and I'm a huge Christian type person, and I do whatever that Bible thing is. All right.
The 2 Corinthians, of course.
Yeah. 2 Corinthians walk into a bar.
It's, he definitely half-asses it, but he's still, genuflects at the altar of I'm religious.
Yes. Right, true. I mean, it's a thing. How did we get here? Now I know. Now, how do we back out from this?
No, I don't know. I mean, if I have offended all you religious people, it's me. Send your nasty emails and texts and tweets to me. I
encourage you to do it anyway.
David have nothing to do with it. He fully respects all your choices.
Probably.
I do. Actually, I do respect the choice. In fact, I'm somewhat envious. I always think how great would it be to really believe that there's this afterlife thing, and that there's this better place that we're going to go to if we're good, and I think, wow, doesn't that be comforting?
Yeah,
wouldn't that make you feel better in life? I would love to feel that way.
I assume that's the way people feel about it. Yeah, and I guess it works. Millions of people do.
Maybe they're right. Maybe when I'm in the bad place, I'll say, God damn it, I wish I would believe it.
Yes. Man, I don't know what to tell you.
I can't make myself believe it just because it would be good for me. I could fake it, I suppose, if I was running for office. But,
yeah. People have different coping mechanisms. That's
all right. I've taken you well off the beaten path.
I think so, but that's all right.
What else do you have in your pocket?
Well, let's see. Here's some, I thought, interesting news that Maryland's Redistricting Commission voted, I guess yesterday, to redraw. They had to redraw their congressional maps, and they selected a map that was drawn for them as appropriate and the best possible choice, and it was drawn by the Daily Kos elections folks.
I love that. Steve Wolf. He's terrific. They're all terrific. It's a tremendous group of people.
What a great
work.
Like, tremendous validation of their work, and their it's the sort of thing, honestly, here's where we can really enjoy it. Like, if they had, in some state, I don't know, some crazy state had adopted a map drawn by, Breitbart or something, people would be going justifiably crazy. And so somewhere in the Breitbart universe, there's, I can't believe they accepted the Daily Kos elections map. But what it is a testament to is that, well, the reason that would happen is you would independently evaluate the map and say, well, to my great surprise, perhaps, the Daily Kos elections people took the assignment, such as it was, seriously, and have produced something that makes sense on outside of a partisan context and is just scientifically sound. Whereas if anybody thought Breitbart was going to propose such a thing, you're crazy.
Well,
good.
You know what? I'm glad in some respects you use Breitbart because there is an example of an institution using Breitbart, relying on Breitbart, and that institution was the New York Times, who took a Breitbart book and splashed it over the front page of the New York Times for a few days in
that's true.
the 2016 campaign. Anyway, I'm going to run.
All right.
And you're right. I give kudos to Steve Wolf, David Neer's team, all those guys. And your point is well taken. They have won universal respect across the board by their hard work, their honesty, and their integrity and their intelligence.
Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, here for our last segment. What are we going to do with this last segment? All right, well, there's a couple of things that are, I guess, top of the lists in terms of things we need to get to. Others we'll just regret a little bit not getting to. I didn't read through the list of people who are on this document request list. I don't know whether that's really a wise use of our time, but I do find now a tweet that has the list, so we'll use that. NBC News correspondent Jeff Bennett tweeted it out yesterday from 1 through 81, so I'll have a list for you to share. Hope Hicks is on it. Let's just say that. I think I like that a lot. How did she do it? How did she get to be number 29 on the list? And the answer is that they're not in any particular order of importance. They are, quite honestly, stupidly enough, in alphabetical order by first name, which is, I don't know. That's weird. You're not supposed to do that. Maybe it was because they had entities listed as well and didn't really know how to mix the two, but I mean, why not do it alphabetically by I don't know. Anyway, so first on the list is Alan Garton, and then Alexander Nix, Alan Weisselberg. Oh, I like Weisselberg should be number 1 in terms of importance, perhaps. But for whatever reason, they did it in alphabetical order, and it only goes through T. They couldn't think of anybody alphabetically after Tony Fabrizio, who's I actually don't know who that is, to request documents of. And I'm trying to think if there's anybody I could come up with. T-U-V, Vladimir Putin would be next, I guess. W-X-Y-Z, I don't know. Xena Warrior Princess, maybe, possibly. I don't know what kind of information she might be holding on this, but there it is. Anyway, I found that somewhat interesting that they would list it that way. Interesting enough to waste our time with that. I don't know, but I just did it. Let's see. So other directions that we can go. I guess what we really need to do is double back on. I'm sorry that I left it to the end of yesterday to discuss motions to recommit, and I ended up having to do it in somewhat haphazard fashion. But I have more thoughts on this, and some of them were disrupted by this Ilhan Omar issue. As I was saying last night, late, when I should have been going to bed, that I was all set to help explain why Democrats had to hang together and listen to leadership and hang tough on motions to recommit in order to avoid artificially putting themselves in bad positions. But then I heard that they were bound and determined on this reproach to Ilhan Omar as a resolution. And I was like, oh, well, I guess that lecture about not putting yourself in bad positions unnecessarily goes out the window. But there really is something to it. There really is good reason not to involve yourself in anything that will put you between a rock and a hard place. Certainly not if you aren't forced there by someone else. Don't put yourself there in a sort of preemptive crouch. And similar point, I guess, being made yesterday. I'll grab her tweet thread about it. Melissa Ryan. Maybe we won't get to necessarily the motions to recommit thoroughly today, but let me set the table for why I think it's important. Melissa Ryan was tweeting about the resolution yesterday in a slightly different context, but I actually think it makes a good analogy. She was saying regarding this monumentally stupid idea of a vote to condemn Congresswoman Omar, I've been reading and thinking a lot lately about what happened to Acorn. Mostly because whenever I train or speak to progressive groups, I warn them about not becoming the next Acorn or letting it happen to others. People forget that at the end of the day, it was Democrats, not Republicans, but Democrats who dealt Acorn the final death blow, which don't lose sight of the fact that Acorn was dealt a death blow. Why? To shield Democrats from accusations leveled by Republicans that, well, the accusations that were being made had nothing to do with the core competencies of Acorn. They were just astonishing, and I don't know how. I guess because it was the first time out of the box for James O'Keefe, we didn't know yet not to believe him, even though there was some pretty significant evidence right away that he wasn't to be believed. But I guess at that point, nobody could believe that anybody would be so brazen in editing videotape in an attempt to make an expose. I guess, I don't know. Had we never seen it before somehow? Now we know, whatever James O'Keefe is releasing, or anybody who was in any way been affiliated with him, if they're releasing something on videotape, you got to parse that thing forensically before reacting to it. Maybe we didn't know. But one of the core competencies of Acorn politically, I guess I should say, that had political import, electoral import, was that Acorn was tremendous in voter registration and voter turnout drives. And that probably, I would say probably almost definitely, had more to do with their being targeted than any idea that they were actually involved in helping people arrange prostitution rings or anything of the sort. But so that ultimately what ended up happening here is that one of the organizations who was doing the most work to register and turn out core Democratic voters was killed by Democrats in a please don't hurt me defensive crouch. And that was a huge win for Republicans, a huge score. And the fact that they, once they scored it, they tried to do it again and again and again to as many groups as they could. And luckily, I guess, we caught on eventually. But anyway, let me continue with Melissa's thread here. People forget that at the end of the day, it was Democrats, not Republicans, but Democrats who dealt Acorn the final death blow. And she includes here a HuffPost piece, how the Acorn scandal seeded today's nightmare politics. Breitbart led the charge. There we are. But Democrats delivered the killing blow. Has anyone really learned? And I guess if you forgot, James O'Keefe was working under the auspices of Breitbart at that time, not his subsequently established stupid nonprofit cover group Project Veritas, but Breitbart. And now, of course, we would all look back and say, oh my God, how could we have allowed ourselves to believe something from Breitbart? And golly, how awful that is. But I guess I didn't really finish that previous point, which is the coup of it all being Republicans pushed Democrats to kill a very effective voter registration and voter turnout operation in the name of voter fraud. That ultimately what they wanted to accuse Acorn of doing was the same stupid mythological idea of voter fraud that they think is happening everywhere among Democrats. That people are voting multiple times, that dead people are voting, et cetera, et cetera. None of which turns out to be true. They can't catch anybody doing that. The only people they can catch doing anything like voter fraud are Republicans. And the only people they're catching doing electoral fraud, which is a different thing, but equally pernicious and maybe even worse, also Republicans. And P.S., when we catch them, they get a do-over. That's the big political news out of NC09 in the last couple days, but we knew that was coming. But yes, they used their crazy, stupid fears of mythological voter fraud to pick the target and got Democrats to do the work. Very amazing. So Melissa goes on to say, this passage from the above article is so important. Note who controlled both houses of Congress when Acorn went down. And I guess you should also toss in the pot the move on condemnation resolution, because they said, General, betray us. And now, of course, everyone calls him that because he got in tremendous legal trouble for kind of betraying us. But anyway, this passage from the above article is included here in the screen grab. It reads as follows. But Washington didn't wait around for the facts to come out. On September 14th, 2009, the Democratic-controlled Senate voted, and who would care whether the control was close or not, when the vote was 83-7 to block some federal grants to Acorn. Some, not all, I guess. Government funding typically counted for 10 to 15% of Acorn's annual funding. The group received $48.4 million from the federal government from 2005 to 2009, most of it, including a $25 million grant in 2008, for housing counseling and foreclosure mitigation. On September 17th, oh, and by the way, why would housing counseling and foreclosure mitigation have been of any importance in 2008, right? Who cares? Whee! On September 17th, the House followed suit with 172 Democrats joining 173 Republicans in voting to defund Acorn, including some of the most progressive voices in the party, such as Representatives Rosa DeLauro, Lloyd Doggett, and John Conyers. So, very interesting and a good point. Acorn, she continues, had been the subject of right-wing conspiracies for ages. Democrats got spooked by the first O'Keefe video and killed it out of pure fear. And by the way, they stopped attacking us, right, after that. And James O'Keefe went away. He was disarmed, right? And they didn't come back at us with voter fraud anymore, and you never heard another thing about it. Now, everything in that video was disproven. But Acorn is gone, and O'Keefe still gets funded. Why is that? Because the right knows this stuff. Let's censor it for just a little bit. I'm anti-First Amendment. Knows this stuff works and we'll keep eating our own. So they keep going. A decade later, and it wasn't a decade, of course, in between, in which they laid off and never targeted anyone else and forced us to eat more of our own. But we are now a decade later. The far right has optimized their ability to do these kinds of attacks to divide and conquer the left. We keep letting them. There's a lot that groups and electeds can do to keep from getting acorned, but when crap hits the fan, they need others to have their back. The best defense against a lot of this stuff from the right, solidarity. And so that's another good reason to be against this stupid thing happening now. And in seeing that yesterday, I did note on Twitter that this thread, I think, Melissa's thread. It's also important, I don't know if everybody saw exactly what I was talking about, but it's also important for consideration on a different but analogous problem, the motion to recommit. Very similar political dynamics, to me anyway, and therefore a similar game. And reminder, you fought hard to win control of the House floor. Do not surrender it so easily. So how do we make that transition? Why do I think that? There's more to the article that I brought up yesterday and a companion piece that might also be of interest. And maybe if I can, I didn't lose those, did I? I thought I kept them in pockets so that I would be able to bring them up quickly. But why it's not immediately apparent, I don't know. Let's poke around here. I guess what I could do is I did include them both in yesterday's roundup post that Scott put together. And I gave him a list of links to add to it. Let's be honest about that. I didn't think that I moved them into the archive because I wanted to keep them around and available for today. And so I refused to believe that I moved them, and so I continued to scroll. But now I'm forced to say, all right, let's take a look at the archive and see. They should be sitting on top of that. Where is it? It's the Politico piece. And I don't know why. All right, well, here's another option. I can go to the yesterday's post and have a look there and see if they're both in the roundup since I included them in the list. There was the motion to recommit. Let's see. This is the second of the two. And there's the Politico one. All right, so the Politico piece that we started with yesterday. Let me read through it because there's also a comment in there from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and so therefore it must be true. I don't know. For some people, anyway. This is the one that began with Pelosi's warning, this is not a day at the beach, right? House Democrats held an emotional debate behind closed doors Thursday, which, by the way, I suggest is something that they could do with Ilhan Omar if they believe that she actually if that needs further discussion. They do have doors that they can close and sit behind if they need to discuss these things. But the discussion was, and this is why it was so ironic, that they don't see this going on in parallel as between, say, Acorn / Omar / Move On and motions to recommit. But House Dems, emotional debate, closed doors Thursday. Why? Over how to stop losing embarrassing procedural battles with Republicans. A clash that exposed the divide between moderates and progressives. Speaker Nancy Pelosi took a hard line at the caucus meeting, saying that being a member of Congress sometimes requires taking tough votes. It also, of course, sometimes requires of the speaker that you help people avoid tough votes by saying no to stupid resolutions. This is not a day at the beach. This is the Congress of the United States, Pelosi said, according to two sources. Pelosi said vulnerable Democrats who had the courage to vote against the Republicans' motion to recommit would become a higher priority for party leadership and the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. That's money moving to them. And, of course, if they or anyone around them is Jewish, that's an anti-Semitic trope because I said money, and so I'm doomed. Representative, REP, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's not Republican at all. The superstar New York freshman lawmaker, we mentioned this part yesterday, suggested she would alert progressive activists when Democrats are voting with the GOP on these motions, said the sources. In the end, Pelosi and other top Democrats didn't agree to any rules change and will continue to study the issue. And we'll do that by, I think, taking a look at this other article, I hope, a little bit about background of what these things actually are. I don't know if I explained it very well yesterday in scattershot fashion. But, okay, Democratic leaders have vowed to do a better job preparing for the Republican motions, but the controversy has divided Pelosi and her longtime lieutenants. This is a problem. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer of Maryland and Majority Whip Jim Clyburn of South Carolina. Pelosi argues that Democrats must stick together on procedural votes, which is the traditional view of party leaders on both sides of the aisle. Hoyer and Clyburn, I guess, are the radical revolutionaries who want to break away from traditional thinking. That, I guess you could put it that way. Hoyer and Clyburn have suggested that moderate members can vote with Republicans if they think it will improve their political standing. Republicans have already won 2 motions to recommit this Congress, including a Wednesday vote that angered Ocasio-Cortez and other progressives. In contrast, Republicans stuck together and never lost a single such motion when they controlled the House from 2011 to 2019. The latest defeat came on Wednesday as the House debated legislation requiring background checks on all gun sales, a position overwhelmingly favored by Democrats and, honestly, by Republican voters, too, just not Republican representatives. When Republicans moved to amend the bill to require immigration and customs enforcement to be told of any undocumented immigrant who tries to buy a gun, 26 Democrats voted with the GOP. Because on its face, like, sure, I mean, I'm just considering what the thing says, right? Why not? They're undocumented, and so that's going to make Republicans in my district who think I'm a moderate happy, because Republicans, if they still identify as such, probably hate immigrants. But at the same time, it's okay because, well, if you're not legally supposed to be allowed to buy a gun, I mean, if you're against putting more guns in circulation, here are some more that aren't in circulation, and these people won't be around to try again elsewhere or later either. So win-win in the minds of these people, I guess. The language was added to the gun bill, spoiling an important Democratic legislative achievement. An earlier GOP motion condemning anti-Semitism, wow, have you ever heard of such a thing, was successfully attached to a House resolution barring U.S. involvement in the Yemeni civil war. That maneuver, which was backed by every Democrat, later caused parliamentary problems in the Senate and upended Democratic attempts to challenge President Donald Trump's foreign policy. So for those who favor having another such friggin' thing voted on, F you. It won't cause the same parliamentary problems because it's a standalone piece, but can't you just point to the fact that you already adopted one that condemned anti-Semitism and be done with it? You already have a pretty good record on it. Unless you call her out by name, there's no point in having another one, and if you do call her out by name, you're an idiot. You shouldn't be doing this. Back to the article. During the closed-door meeting on Thursday, Pelosi said Democrats who vote for the Republicans' motions are putting pressure on other vulnerable colleagues who would prefer to stick with the party. We're either a team or we're not, and we have to make that decision, she said. Pelosi told reporters afterwards that she thinks Democrats should simply vote against the GOP motions, saying to do otherwise gives Republicans leverage. But Pelosi didn't endorse the idea, which some lawmakers support, of changing House rules and nixing the procedural vote altogether, that some lawmakers support. And I guess we should be fair to Steny Hoyer here in saying that I told you this has been a problem for a long time. This is a decades-old problem. And the last time Democrats controlled the House, they did have the same problem. They lost about the same number of motions to recommit. At that time, Rahm Emanuel was also in leadership, and he too took the position that Hoyer and Clyburn take, that this was a good thing, and that Democrats ought to distance themselves when necessary for their districts from the Democratic leadership, if necessary to demonstrate their independence, or if there was a certain topic on which they needed to join Republicans or appear like they had bipartisan leanings, you know, there were across the aisle cooperators, whatever, that was okay. But it led to a lot of substantive defeats. And but I will say, in Hoyer's defense, he did in fact threaten and move forward with a proposed rules change. I don't think he ever actually brought it to the floor, but he was pushing hard for a rules change that would eliminate the motion to recommit. He said, all right, well, if you won't, I don't think it's actually the best outcome that we allow members to vote their districts. It's the best outcome we can get out of the current rules situation. But if we eliminated the motion to recommit entirely, then we could, in fact, stick together as a team, and it would be easier to do. So in some ways, he was pushing even harder for a solution that could result in caucus unity than Pelosi was. But it was deemed, and I think it's probably the right choice to say, well, changing the rules over that is kind of a temper tantrum. It's a tough vote, but just go do it. I think I ultimately come down on Pelosi's position on this one. It's unseemly, given how little influence the minority has in the House, to erase that one chance, as dumb as it is, since we're going to obviate it by saying it doesn't matter what the substance of the proposal is, vote against it. We might as well just eliminate it. But, the fact that it's technically there is of perhaps some symbolic importance. Maybe that's it. Anyway, continuing on with the article here. I'm a big believer in respecting the whole House and the rights of the minority to have their say, Pelosi said during her weekly news conference. I think we should just vote against all motions to recommit. It's a procedural vote. It's a gotcha on the part of the opposition. Inside the meeting, this is where some of the important stuff comes on. Inside the meeting, Ocasio-Cortez said she has a text chain with 200 activists in her district that she's in constant contact with on issues facing Democrats. I wasn't so happy necessarily about this part, but this part was what I liked, the explanation of what it did to her, really. Ocasio-Cortez said she even considered voting against the background checks bill because of the Republican language on ICE, perhaps the most hated federal agency on the left. Ocasio-Cortez went up to the gallery after the vote to tell activists she, quote, had to choose between immigrants and gun violence, not because of Republicans, but because of Democrats, said a source in the room. And it's funny because there's this sort of triggering effect with me when I hear, not necessarily Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but certain Democratic-aligned leftist activists who I like, saying things like, pointing out at every opportunity that our problems are really because of Democrats, and Democrats don't cut the mustard. They don't measure up the way they, but I continue to listen to them and I continue to like them because they have a point, and it's really true, and it's painful, but I need to be reminded of that from time to time so that we can keep people in shape here. And she's right here. It was Democrats that forced her to have to choose. Do I live up to my pledge on gun violence, or do I live up to my pledge on immigrants and ICE? And you almost lost Democratic votes, potentially, on the first major gun violence legislation in, what did somebody say, 25 years, because ICE, really? What does ICE have to do with this? They don't have any gun jurisdiction. Why did we put them in here? I think it's an extension, she says, of Trump's tactics into the House, and we cannot legitimize it, and we cannot allow for it, and we cannot support it, Ocasio-Cortez told reporters after the meeting. But other members stood up in the meeting and challenged this view, without specifically calling out Pelosi or Ocasio-Cortez. Freshman Representative Xochitl Torres-Small, and good, let's hear from her on this one, who voted for the GOP motion on Wednesday, which might have surprised some of you, grew visibly emotional when speaking and pointedly said, courage looks different to different people, according to two sources in the room. Not the most powerful restatement of it, but I understand the point. Some lawmakers and aides exited the meeting frustrated with Ocasio-Cortez's remarks, with one member saying the freshman's comments sounded like a passive-aggressive threat to Democrats who vote for GOP motions. Well, yeah. What are you doing voting for GOP motions? I can't believe you're surprised by that. A senior Democratic aide aligned with the caucus's moderate wing said it was completely hypocritical for progressives to complain about the tough votes they had to take on Wednesday. Is it? Moderates are in tough positions all the time, and they don't shy away from that. Who put you there? That's your business. Really, honestly. Anyway, they have to vote their districts or they will be defeated, plain and simple. The rest of the caucus should understand that. Democrats aren't sure how to handle the issue going forward. Representative Juan Vargas of California is part of a growing contingent who want to get rid of the motion to recommit completely, telling a reporter, "I think the motion to recommit is the dumbest thing I've ever seen." Vargas spoke in favor of nixing the procedural tool during Thursday's meeting. "I've had my mole for 57 years. Interesting. It's right there on my arm. That kind of mole," Vargas told Politico after pointing to his elbow, "and it does no good either. It just sits there. One day maybe becoming cancerous. It's the same thing with the motion to recommit. There's no good reason for it." Other members disagreed. Rules Committee Chairman Jim McGovern telling his colleagues it would show weakness to get rid of the motion to recommit entirely, though he's not opposed to making changes. He later told reporters that party leaders would continue to review the issue in the coming weeks. "I think that the Republicans, like the Democrats, when we were in the minority, used the motion to recommit as a gotcha tactic, and I personally think we shouldn't fall for it. People need to be aware that coming down the road will be gotcha amendments that actually gut the bill." That's absolutely true. We're going to have to give over even more time later this week to discuss perhaps the actual nuts and bolts of the motion to recommit, in case there are people who don't get exactly why that's the case. But more important, I think, was putting on the record the disagreement about what to do about it and how it can divide the Democratic caucus and how you attempt to solve these things. You don't rush to the floor with the rules change and see how it falls out, right? You discuss it in caucus first, and that could be an important lesson for how to deal with what we were talking about
from Daily
earlier
Kos
today.
Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, stay tuned for Justice Putnam's program, The West Coast Cookbook, and Speakeasy coming up next. All the stuff that we ignored for today back on the table. Coastal states mount bipartisan resistance as Trump forges ahead with his offshore drilling plans. California suing the Trump administration over the family planning gag rule, and much, much more next.